Ashes of the Forgotten. The skies over Tassari Prime had not been blue in months. Once a world of green valleys and floating crystal gardens, the colony was now a fractured wound beneath a scorched atmosphere. Smoke curled up in twisted columns from smoldering ruins, and ash drifted down like dead snow. The air tasted of fire and despair. Vereen moved through the remains of the south quarter, her long fingers slick with drying blood. The wounded cried softly around her, huddled in makeshift shelters patched with solar tarps and shredded uniforms. She paused to press a pain inhibitor to a child's temple, a wide-eyed boy with scales dulled to a sickly gray. He didn't flinch. He'd learned already that flinching was a luxury of safer days. "We're running out," her assistant whispered. "Pain meds, sealants, almost everything." Vereen nodded. "Prioritize the young and the fighters. The elders will understand." She rose, her slender form silhouetted by the flickering light of a half-buried plasma lantern. Around her, what remained of the Tassari people gathered scraps of hope and called it courage. But she could see the truth in their eyes. Fear, resignation, loss. It had been 74 days since the Dravari marauders had arrived. No declaration of war, no demands, only silence, and then fire from the skies. The Dravari weren't conquerors. They didn't want labor or tribute. They wanted extinction. They wanted the Tassari wiped from the stars like a stain. And the galaxy had watched and done nothing. They had sent out hundreds of distress beacons, appeals to neighboring systems, pleas to the Galactic Council, to old trade allies, even to rival colonies who once shared technology with them. No one had come. Not a ship, not a scout. Only silence. Tonight, the council met again in the ruins of the old administration hall. Its spire, once a shining silver tower, lay collapsed like a broken bone. "The shield will fail by tomorrow night," said High Strategist Halloran, his voice hollow. "The last power cell is almost drained. We have no air support, no fleet," added another. "We cannot win." "Then we make our final stand with dignity," Halloran said. "We face the fire and do not beg." A murmur of grim agreement followed. It was the only thing left to agree upon. Vereen remained silent. She looked out the shattered window, toward the horizon. Faint red glows marked the enemy's position. Dravari camps like nests of coiled serpents. They were patient. They were waiting. The final blow would fall soon. She had known this moment was coming, had prepared for it. Yet something inside her refused to collapse. A stubborn ember. "We may be alone," she said softly, "but perhaps anyone heard us." The room fell silent. One of the elders shook his head. "The others do not care. We are not strategic. We are not profitable. They have written us off." And then, as if summoned by her words, the old emergency console in the corner let out a high-pitched tone. A signal, weak, fragmented. They all turned. An engineer scrambled over, fingers flying across the crack controls. It's a response," he stammered. The display flickered, static cutting through a gravel voice. "Distress signal received, coordinates locked. Earth response unit en route." Silence. No one moved. "Earth?" One of the counselors echoed, incredulous. "The humans? I thought they were a myth," another said. "A fringe world, barely off their cradle planet. They don't even have council seats," Halloran scoffed. "How could they help us?" Vereen stepped closer to the console, her heart pounding. She had heard of Earth, legends, really. A chaotic, warlike species too volatile for diplomacy. They were rarely seen beyond their quadrant. Few trusted them. Fewer had ever met them. But the voice had been real. The words unmistakable. They were coming. 1 ship? 10? It didn't matter. In a void of silence, even one voice could sound like salvation. The council argued. Was it a joke? A rogue transmission? A trap? Vereen said nothing. She looked again to the wounded, to the children hiding behind broken walls. Her people were dying, and anyone was coming. As the council bickered, she moved to the comm station. She placed her palm on the interface and spoke clearly. "To the Earth Response Unit. We received your transmission. Please hurry." Outside, the red glow on the horizon pulsed like a heartbeat. And somewhere, far beyond the stars, a warship turned toward the dying light of Tassari Prime. The black drop, The stars above Tassari Prime trembled. At first, it looked like debris, a flicker, a burned trail across the poisoned sky. Vereen stood outside the triage tent, staring upward as the streak of fire grew brighter, descending faster than any vessel she'd seen. The remaining Tassari civilians ducked instinctively, expecting another Dravari missile. But this was different. It didn't spiral or scream. It moved with purpose. A thunderous boom cracked the horizon as the object hit the outer plains just past the colony walls, shaking the ground beneath her feet. The shockwave rippled through the dust and ash, rolling like a tide. For a moment, everything was still, and then the comms tower crackled again. Earth Response Unit has landed, preparing forward position. Vereen's breath caught in her throat. It was real. They'd come. The council gathered hastily, arguing again, whether to approach, whether it was safe. But Vereen was already moving, medkit slung over her shoulder, drawn forward by something she didn't fully understand. Hope, maybe, or desperation with a new name. She reached the crater on the edge of the southern ridge within an hour. What she saw stopped her cold. The drop pod was matte black, still steaming from atmospheric entry. Its surface seamless except for small venting ports releasing bursts of coal vapor. It looked more like a weapon than a ship. No insignia, no bright colors. Only a single symbol, scorched into the hull, a clenched fist over a rising sun. A ramp hissed open, releasing another wave of pressure and steam. Four figures emerged. They weren't tall, not compared to Tassari, but they felt enormous. Bulky armor encased them, shaped for function, not beauty. Dark gray plating streaked with carbon scarring. Their visors glowed faint blue, and their movements were precise, deliberate, quiet. Not machines, not saviors. Soldiers. One of them stepped forward. Her armor was heavier than the others, scratched and worn like it had seen 1,000 battles. She removed her helmet, revealing a sharp-eyed, weathered human face. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes locked onto Vereen's like a targeting system. Sergeant Rhea Carter, Earth Response Unit. You're in charge. Vereen swallowed. Medic Vereen. I know, I'm not. Good enough. Carter turned and gestured. Zhao, start recon. Mendoza, perimeter drones. Okoro, help the dock with casualty reports. The other 3 humans split off instantly. No ceremony, no speeches, just motion. Vereen stared as Private Okoro, his helmet still on, approached with a scanning pad. He spoke softly, voice filtered through his armor. Point me to your worst-hit areas. She hesitated. You're only 4. Okoro gave a quiet chuckle. For now. He moved past her without waiting for a reply. Within hours, the drop site had transformed. Automated turrets rose from the ground like metal trees. Drones zipped through the air, mapping the terrain, tagging enemy positions. The Earth Warriors set up a mobile command center inside a shattered school building, repurposing walls into defensive barriers. Vereen watched them work with a strange mix of awe and unease. The humans barely spoke to each other aloud, using encrypted comms and hand signals. Their tech was crude by galactic standards, no elegant AI interfaces or gravitic scaffolds, but it was effective. Brutally so. She found herself trailing Sergeant Carter as the human assessed the outer defenses. The alien ruins, the starving civilians, the skeletal resistance. Carter took it all in without a flicker of emotion. You don't look surprised, Vereen said at last. I've seen worse, Carter replied. Earth doesn't get invited to parties. We clean up after them. Vereen tried to read her, but the woman was like a sealed vault. Why did you come? Carter stopped and looked out toward the horizon. Because you asked. That night, the human struck first. A Dravari scout patrol approached the southern ridge. They never even saw the trap. A dozen drones, armed with microcharges, dropped from the clouds and disabled their forward sensors. Mendoza's rail cannon fired once. Clean, bright, devastating. The enemy fell in seconds. No survivors. No sound. From the colony's makeshift walls, Vereen watched the footage stream across the council's console. She had never seen death like that, delivered with such precision. The Earth warriors moved like specters through smoke. They did not fight fair. They did not fight clean. They fought to win. When the footage ended, the room fell into stunned silence. Even Halloran was speechless. Carter stood beside them, arms folded, expression flat. "This was a warning," she said. "Let your people know. We don't run. We don't beg. We dig in. We fight." "And what happens when the Dravari send a real force?" Halloran asked, voice trembling with bitter doubt. Carter looked him in the eye. "Then they learn what happens when Earth answers a call. 100 to 1. They came at dawn." Vareen stood atop the eastern ridge, watching the valley below shudder under the weight of the Dravari war machines. The enemy moved like a living storm. Metal-wrapped beasts, plasma tanks grinding across the scorched ground, insectoid foot soldiers swarming behind armored walkers. She counted dozens, maybe hundreds. The dust they kicked up blotted the rising sun. This was it, the final blow. The humans had known it was coming. Sergeant Carter stood calmly behind the barricades, her helmet locked on, armor scorched from the last night's skirmish. Her voice came through the comms, cool and precise. "All positions. Hold until you see the signal. Remember your lanes. No hero stuff." Vareen could hardly believe they were planning to fight. The Earth squad was still just 4 people. Even with the drones, the rigged explosives, the jury-rigged shields, they were outnumbered 100 to 1. But the Earth warriors never hesitated. Not once. Private Okoro crouched beside her, checking the charge on a shoulder-mounted railgun that was nearly as tall as he was. "You afraid?" she asked. He paused, his helmet tilting slightly toward her. "Yeah, that's how I know I'm still thinking straight." She tried to laugh, but it caught in her throat. She saw a fresh scar along his jaw, barely healed. He must have taken a hit 2 nights ago, shielding one of the Tassari children. He hadn't even mentioned it. "Why do you do this?" she asked. Okoro looked out toward the horizon, voice softer now. "Because Earth learned the hard way. Nobody's coming to save you. You stand, or you burn." The first shots rang out like thunder. Dravari forces breached the outer kill zone, stepping into carefully mapped corridors laced with Earth tech and Tassari traps. That was when the sky itself lit up, turrets burst to life, drones screamed from the clouds, and Mendoza's custom mech stomped through the wreckage of a collapsed tower, its fists blazing with kinetic amplifiers. "Come get some, you radioactive slugs," he roared over the open comms as he tore through the first wave. Vareen watched from cover as Mendoza, laughing, swearing, unstoppable, punched straight through a Dravari battle tank. The explosion turned night into day. Cheers erupted from the Tassari fighters, many holding weapons for the first time in their lives. She turned and saw Sergeant Carter beside her, issuing commands, adjusting air support drones, recalibrating shields. Zhao's fingers flew across a portable console, rerouting power from the colony grid to keep the defense turrets online. It was chaos, roaring, bloody chaos. And yet the Earth warriors moved like they owned the battlefield. They didn't fight like diplomats or knights. They fought like survivors. But even gods bleed. An hour into the battle, Zhao went silent. A Dravari sniper, smarter than the rest, had traced the signal relay line. One shot to the chest plate. She fell back, smoke curling from the wound. Carter and Okoro dragged her to cover, shouting for medical help. Vareen rushed in. Zhao was alive, barely, eyes open but unfocused. Vareen did what she could, sealed the wound, stabilized her breathing. But they were losing people now. The shield generator sputtered. The Dravari pushed harder. For every one that fell, 2 more surged forward. Still, Carter never gave the order to retreat. Instead, she planted her boots in the dirt, raised her rifle, and stood at the front line. The Tassari, watching her through the smoke and blood, suddenly saw something they had forgotten. They saw defiance, and they followed. Vareen watched as once-broken farmers and glassmakers picked up old rifles and joined the line. One by one, then by the dozens. Their aim wasn't perfect. Their shields flickered, but they stood, shoulder to shoulder with humans. Okoro tossed his helmet aside, blood on his brow, grin still shining. "Now this," he said, "this is how you start a revolution." By mid-afternoon, the battlefield was littered with wreckage. The Dravari commander sent a wideband message demanding surrender. Carter answered by detonating the last bridge to the valley entrance, sealing the path behind her in fire. The humans didn't retreat. They held. When night fell, the last Dravari transport fled into the sky, dragging what few survivors they had left. And for the first time in months, Tassari Prime was silent. Not dead, silent. Vereen sat by a fire that night, her hands shaking, drying blood on her tunic. She looked at the survivors huddled around the flames, her people bruised but breathing, and the humans, Carter rewrapping her shoulder wound, Mendoza retelling the tank punch story with wild embellishment, Okoro asleep with his rifle across his chest, Zhao breathing steadily in a medbed, still alive. They had stood against the impossible, and won. They changed us, she whispered, not just with weapons, but with belief. Earth answers. It began with a whisper, a message from Tassari Prime broadcast across every open frequency in the sector. A single statement, translated into dozens of languages, carried on the static of deep space. We are not alone. Earth came. Vereen stood in what was once the colony's main square, now transformed into a war memorial. The melted husks of Dravari walkers formed a twisted arch above a garden of salvaged crystal flowers. Children played near the statue of the Earth team. Rough stone carvings, hurried but heartfelt. Carter hated it, of course. We're not statues, she'd muttered, arms crossed. We're soldiers. But the Tassari needed statues. They needed proof the nightmare had ended. More than that, they needed to remember who stood with them when no one else did. The humans were still here, helping rebuild. A second Earth dropship had arrived days ago, bringing supplies, engineers, medics. No banners, no diplomats, just more boots on the ground. Quiet, tireless, unshakable. Zhao was walking again, her side patched with regrowth gel. Mendoza taught local kids how to rig perimeter alarms out of scrap metal and pride. Okoro ran drills with young Tassari, who now wore cobbled-together armor like badges of honor. And Carter? She walked the edge of the colony every morning. Not inspecting, guarding. The war was over, but Earth didn't believe in assuming safety. Vereen found her one morning, standing beneath the scarred skeleton of a ruined spire, watching the horizon. "Do you ever stop?" she asked, approaching with 2 mugs of bitterroot tea. Carter took one with a grunt. "Rest is for civilians. You've earned it." Carter stared into the cup. "Tell that to the next colony." No one answers. They drank in silence. After a moment, Vereen spoke softly. "You changed us, the Tassari." "You changed yourselves," Carter replied. "We just gave you a little time to remember how." Vereen looked at her, really looked, and finally understood something. The humans didn't come to be heroes. They didn't fight for praise or gratitude. They came because they refused to accept silence in the face of suffering. That made them dangerous, and it made them extraordinary. The signal Vereen had sent weeks ago didn't just reach Earth. It had reached everyone, and now they were listening. Within days of the Tassari broadcast, new messages came in, halting, hopeful voices from abandoned worlds. From miners on Karathi's edge. From exiles on shattered moons. From forgotten colonies thought lost to pirates or plague. The message was always the same. "We saw you. We heard," Earth answered. "Can we hope again?" The Galactic Council, embarrassed and shamed, released statements dripping with bureaucracy. They offered condolences, inquiries, and meaningless apologies. But Earth didn't wait for permission. They mobilized. Unaligned, unofficial, and unrelenting, Earth began dispatching small squads of volunteers, mercenaries, soldiers, and medics. Not for conquest, not for credit, just one mission. No one dies in the dark. They weren't diplomats. They didn't ask nicely. They showed up. 3 weeks later, the Dravari returned. Not with an army, but with a delegation. One of their sleek warships landed on a neutral moon near Tassari space. A Dravari emissary disembarked under flag of truce protocols. Word reached the Tassari Council and Earth Command at once. The Dravari wanted to negotiate. Vereen joined Carter at the meeting. The human team arrived with armor on, weapons holstered, but visible. No pretense, no frills. The Dravari emissary, a tall, six-eyed creature wreathed in ceremonial bone, tilted its head as Carter approached. "You are the humans," it said, voice like whetstone. "The ones who do not understand how the galaxy works." Carter didn't blink. "Oh, we understand. You thought no one would come. You were wrong." A long pause. Then the Dravari lowered its eyes. "We wish to avoid further Earth entanglements." A silence fell over the room, thick with history and threat. Vereen held her breath. Carter simply nodded once. "Then stay off Tassari's soil. Stay off any soil where someone asks for help, or we will come again." The emissary's mandibles twitched. It left without another word. Back on Tassari Prime, the stars looked different. Not brighter, not safer, but watched. Vereen stood with Carter on the rebuilt observation deck. Children played below. Drones zipped by on patrol. A new beacon tower stood in the distance, its signal reaching deep into space. Not a distress call anymore. A promise. She turned to Carter. "What now?" Carter sipped her tea. "We wait." "For what?" Carter looked toward the stars. "For the next call." Epilogue. They thought no one would come. Across the stars, on cold moons and burning worlds, forgotten people whispered a new word with reverence. Earth. Not because Earth was rich, not because Earth was noble, because when the galaxy turned away, they came. And behind every cry in the dark, now lived a single spark of hope. Maybe Earth will come for us too.